Right now, at the bottom of the world, there's a place where almost nothing can live. Antarctica, a frozen desert the size of the United States and Europe combined, buried under ice nearly 3 miles thick. The coldest, windiest, driest continent on Earth, a white wasteland where the temperature can drop low enough to freeze your breath into falling crystals, and where the few creatures that survive cling to the very edges, never the heart. It looks eternal, like it has always been this way and always will be, but it hasn't. Hidden beneath all that ice is a secret that sounds impossible, a buried world, because Antarctica wasn't always white. Once it was green, warm, alive, covered in forests, crawling with creatures, with rivers running where glaciers now stand. This is the story of Antarctica before it froze. And what it used to be will change how you see that frozen continent forever. To understand how strange this is, you have to throw out everything the word Antarctica makes you picture. Wind back the clock, not thousands of years, but tens of millions. Back then, the continents weren't where they are today. They drifted slowly, like rafts on molten rock beneath them. And Antarctica wasn't sitting alone at the bottom of the planet, locked in ice. It was joined to the others, part of a single gigantic landmass, and it sat in a warmer place, bathed in a climate nothing like the freezer it is now. There was no ice cap, none. Instead, picture rolling green landscapes, dense forests stretching toward the horizon, ferns unfurling in the warm air, tall trees with broad canopies, swamps and floodplains threaded with slow rivers, a land that was lush, humid, and teeming. Now, here's the part that breaks people's brains a little. Antarctica was still at the bottom of the world. It still sat near the South Pole, which means for part of the year it was plunged into months of total darkness, just like today. But instead of a frozen void, that darkness fell over living forests. Think about that. A warm, green woodland that spent months of every year in near total night, then swung back into endless summer daylight. Any creature living there had to survive something no animal today experiences. A forest that goes dark for a season without ever going cold. And creatures did live there. Strange ones, specialized ones, animals built for a world that no longer exists. That's where this story truly comes alive. Let's start with the age of the dinosaurs, because yes, Antarctica had them too. When this land was warm and forested, dinosaurs walked through those southern woods. But these weren't quite the same as their relatives elsewhere. Living at the bottom of the world, through those long, dark winters, shaped them into something unique. These were the polar dinosaurs, and they were survivors of a kind we rarely imagine. Picture a plant eater the size of a large animal, moving in herds through the dim forest, stripping ferns and low branches, its eyes adapted to make the most of the weak polar light. Picture smaller, agile hunters moving among them, fast and sharp-sensed, built to thrive in a world that went black for months at a time. Some of these dinosaurs may have had unusually large eyes, an adaptation for seeing in that long winter gloom. Some may have huddled through the dark season, waiting out the night that lasted for months. And here's something remarkable the rocks have revealed. In these ancient polar forests, the trees themselves tell the story of that strange light. Their growth rings show bursts of frantic summer growth, then long pauses, the seasons of darkness frozen into the wood. A forest that lived its life in pulses of light and shadow. This was not the violent, sun-baked world of the dinosaurs we usually picture. It was quieter, stranger, a shadowed southern kingdom where life had learned to endure the dark. But the dinosaurs were only one chapter, because when their reign ended, Antarctica's forests didn't die with them. They kept going, and what moved into them next was even stranger. After the asteroid wiped out the giant dinosaurs, the world went through its great reshuffling, and Antarctica, still warm, still green, became a refuge for the survivors and the strange new creatures that rose up to fill the empty world. This is where Antarctica gets truly bizarre, because the animals that thrived here next were a mix you'd never expect to share a single forest. There were marsupials, relatives of today's opossums, and, distantly, kangaroos, scurrying through the southern undergrowth. In fact, Antarctica may have been a crucial stepping stone in their history, a green bridge that connected the marsupials of South America to the ones that would eventually rule Australia. The pouch-bearing mammals of the world today may owe part of their story to this forgotten forest. But it wasn't only mammals. Alongside them lived strange, ancient birds. Some were enormous, and in the surrounding seas, life was exploding into forms that would dominate the southern oceans for ages to come. And the forests themselves were a kind of living museum. Towering southern beech trees, ferns and mosses and conifers, the ancestors of plants that still survive in scattered corners of the southern hemisphere today, in Patagonia, in New Zealand, in Tasmania. If you want to see a living ghost of ancient Antarctica, you can. Those plants are its descendants, scattered to the few warm refuges that remained when the cold finally came. Because the cold was coming. Slowly, invisibly, the world was changing around this green continent, and the warm, living Antarctica was running out of time. So what happened? How does a warm, forested continent turn into the frozen wasteland we know today? The answer isn't a sudden catastrophe. There was no asteroid this time, no single day of disaster. What killed the green Antarctica was something far slower and, in its own way, far more relentless. It was geography itself, shifting beneath everyone's feet. For all those millions of years, Antarctica had been connected, or close enough, to the other southern continents. Warm ocean currents from the tropics could flow down and wash against its shores, carrying heat to the bottom of the world and keeping the forests alive. Antarctica stayed warm because the rest of the planet was, in a sense, holding its hand. But the continents never stopped moving, and one by one, the land connections broke. South America pulled away. Australia drifted north toward warmer waters. And as the last bridges opened up, something new and terrible was born. A current that could now flow all the way around Antarctica in an endless circle with no land to stop it. This circular current became a wall, a moving barrier of cold water that wrapped around the entire continent and sealed it off from the warm tropical currents that had kept it alive. Antarctica was, quite literally, cut off, isolated at the bottom of the world, left to fend for itself in the cold. And once that happened, the temperature began to fall, not in a year, not in a century, but steadily, generation after generation, the warmth drained away, and the long death of the forests began. The freezing of Antarctica is one of the saddest slow stories in the history of our planet. A green world dimming, frame by frame, over millions of years. At first, it was subtle. Winters that bit a little harder, summers that ran a little shorter, snow that lingered on the high ground a few weeks longer each time, where once it had melted away. The forests didn't fall all at once. They retreated, Inch by inch, the trees gave ground, surviving in the warmer valleys and along the coasts while the cold crept down from the mountains. Then the first glaciers were born. High in the peaks, snow stopped melting entirely and began to pile year on year, compressing into ice. Those early glaciers slid downward, slow rivers of ice grinding through the dying forests, scraping the green from the land. And every cold cycle they grew bigger, and they reached farther. The animals had nowhere left to go. They were at the bottom of the world. There was no warmer land to escape to, no southern refuge beyond. The marsupials, the strange birds, the polar survivors of that ancient forest. They were slowly squeezed out of existence on that continent, their world closing in around them like a fist. And then, at last, the ice won completely. The glaciers met and merged into a single vast sheet. The forests were gone. The rivers froze. The soil that had grown trees for 100 million years vanished beneath a crushing dome of ice that, in places, would grow nearly 3 miles deep, burying that entire lost world, sealing it away beneath the white. What had taken an eternity to build was, in the end, simply switched off. And if you've come with me this far, all the way from the frozen present back into that lost green world, and watched it disappear under the ice, then let me say something to you. Most people will look at Antarctica their whole lives and see nothing but a dead sheet of white. They'll never know there's an entire buried world underneath it, with forests and creatures, and a story most of us were never told. If you want to keep uncovering the hidden histories of our planet, the lost world sleeping under our feet, then subscribe and stay with us, because this is exactly the kind of story we live for. Now, here's the part that makes this more than just a tale about the past. Because that buried world isn't entirely gone. It's still down there. Beneath the ice, scientists have found them. The fossils, leaves, wood, pollen, the bones of those polar creatures, perfectly preserved in the rock under the glaciers. There are even ancient mountain ranges and the carved beds of rivers down there, frozen exactly as they were the day the ice rolled over them. Antarctica is a time capsule, a snapshot of a warm green world, locked in cold storage at the bottom of the planet. And in recent years, we've found something almost haunting. Drill down through the ice, analyze what's trapped beneath, and the ancient forest reveals itself in stunning detail. Root systems, pollen, the chemical fingerprints of a temperate rainforest that once thrived where there is now nothing but frozen silence. The ghost of green Antarctica is still there, waiting just out of reach beneath the ice. So the next time you see Antarctica, that blinding white emptiness at the bottom of every map, try to see what's really there. Underneath that ice is the memory of a warm green continent, forests that breathed through months of darkness, polar dinosaurs moving through the southern gloom, strange little marsupials that may have helped seed an entire branch of life on the other side of the world, rivers and soil and roots and life, an entire living world switched off and filed away beneath the cold. Antarctica didn't just freeze, it remembered. It kept everything, preserved in perfect, frozen stillness, as if the planet itself wanted us to one day dig it up and understand what was lost. And there's something humbling in that, because it's a reminder that nothing about our world is permanent, not even something that looks as eternal and unchanging as a frozen continent. The map you grew up with is just one frame of a film that has been running for billions of years. Warm places freeze, frozen places thaw. Forests become ice, and one day the ice may become forest again. The Antarctica we know is not the real Antarctica. It's just the chapter we happen to be born into. If this story stayed with you, follow the channel so you can keep unearthing these lost worlds with me, and share it with 5 people who still think Antarctica was always just ice. Then tell me in the comments, which forgotten world should we bring back to life next? I read every single one. I'll see you in the next lost world.